We are ready.
Right. Okay to start, Iris?
Yes.
Recording in progress.
Thank you. So good evening. Welcome everyone to the Monday, June 28th, 2021 Plan Commission and Commission for Citizen Involvement meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order, but first, Iris, would you please call the roll?
Beckett. Fisher.
Here.
Heap.
Here.
Leak.
Here.
Pepe is excused. Simler.
Here.
Stewart.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Iris. So we have a quorum. First on our agenda tonight is a council update, but I don't believe we have a council update for tonight. So we'll move on to public comments. These are regarding issues not on the agenda. Iris, was there anyone who wished to make a public comment for issues not on the agenda?
No.
All right, thank you. Next on the agenda is a Commission for Citizen Involvement General Updates. I don't have anything to add for the Commission for Citizen Involvement. Maybe one note I could make was that, you know, as the COVID restrictions are getting lifted, the Plan Commission had in the past had tours of neighborhoods and tried to you know, really go out and tour areas to see issues regarding planning. So I'm a little bit optimistic with the COVID restrictions lifting that we might be able to continue that again, but no definite plans right now. It's just let's wait till the COVID restrictions get lifted, and then we'll explore more opportunities to do more of the tours. So I think in the past, commissioners have enjoyed that, and then I know the neighborhoods appreciate it too, and other bodies and planning have enjoyed those tours. So we'll look at maybe restarting those shortly. So then I'd like to move on to the agenda item. So work session item number 6.1. It's House Bills 2001 and 2003. Work session number 4, part 2. Public comment is accepted. 5 minutes per individual applies. If anybody wanted to make comments, they should have emailed by noon today the request to make a comment. Iris, was there any email that we got for individuals wishing to make a comment tonight?
No, we received none.
All right. So the Planning Commission will receive a presentation from staff outlining a proposed work plan and community outreach strategy for the next phase of the city's work to comply with House Bills 2001. The staff coordinator is Erik Olson, senior planner. Erik, would you like to give us an update?
Thank you, Chair Heap. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with some slides that I prepared for tonight. So just one moment. All right, so can everybody see that okay?
Yes, we can see.
All right. Well, again, thank you for having me tonight and for accommodating me. I know that we were originally scheduled for the 14th, so definitely appreciative that you were able to get me in on the next work session. And as Chair Heap mentioned, I'm here just to give a brief update on where we're at with House Bill 2001 and a description of our proposed work plan for phase 2 of our work going forward. So just to give a bit of review on phase 1 and kind of where we're at, you know, at the end of phase 1, really, you know, we've gone through different sort of steps of the process, working with Cascadia partners on the development of deliverables that were produced and released to the public as of last month at the, I think in the mid portion of the month at least. So that was back in May. So we had a session on the 18th with a sort of preview of those findings and a bit of a description of where we're going with the phase 2 work plan. On the 24th, we had just a planning commission work session where we talked a little bit more about the findings and dove into the reports that were produced by Cascadia, particularly the Middle Housing Opportunities Report. And on the 28th, which is today, we have a rescheduled work session to talk a bit about phase 2 moving forward. So as you can see, we're right at the end of phase 1, just to provide a bit of review. In terms of what's been happening recently at City Council, I know we didn't have our council update today, but with respect to the Middle Housing Code Advisory Committee, on the 1st of June, City Council adopted Resolution 2118 to create the committee. So as they called it, the Middle Housing Code Advisory Committee. And this is something that we had discussed at the Joint Planning Commission and City Council work session on May 18th, and had gotten direction at that work session to move forward with this from City Council. So the Middle Housing Code Advisory Committee is really going to be tasked with making recommendations to both the Council and the Planning Commission that are consistent with Council's objectives to comply with HB 2001 in a way that is consistent with the community's sense of place, neighborhood character, and livability, which is their objective for this year. So really the advisory committee will be making recommendations to Council and Planning Commission, and they're expected to provide guidance to staff and the commission as we go through and promulgate code, which is develop our proposed code amendments for compliance with House Bill 2001 as we move forward with phase 2. So there was another City Council meeting on June 15th, so just a few weeks ago, just almost exactly 2 weeks, just under 2 weeks. So Council Resolution 2119 was adopted at that meeting. So that was the resolution that sort of appointed specific members, and I'll go over the membership on the next slide here. I just want to point out that we have some tentative meeting times for the committee, so I've listed those on the screen here. We're still kind of finalizing all that, but that looks like where we've landed in terms of those meeting dates and times. And ultimately, the schedule is oriented such that we will be recommending code concepts and amendments, concepts for code amendments rather, by October of this year. Or the committee will, at least, with staff as facilitator. So the list of members is right here. This is from the council resolution. These are the specific folks that were appointed to the committee. As you can see, there's a pretty wide range of perspectives that council has included with the folks that they have appointed and that the mayor has approved for the committee. So we have Councilor Verdict from City Council, Commissioner Arthur from the DRC, the Development Review Commission rather. We have Cynthia Johnson, who's a member of the 50 Plus Advisory Board, Advisory Board member rather, Larry Snyder from HRAB, the Historic Resources Advisory Board. The designated commission liaison from the Planning Commission is David Beckett, as approved in the resolution. The representative from the Sustainability Advisory Board is Stephanie Glazer from the DEI advisory board process. It's still being appointed currently, but we do have a representative, Lisa Strader. We have two folks from the Neighborhood Chairs Committee here in Lake Oswego representing chairs of neighborhood associations. So Carol Ockert from First Edition Forest Hills and Bob Urban from Uplands. We also have architect Ross Masters we have architect Ralph Tarrin rather, and building industry advocate Ross Masters from Crosswater Development. He's more of a developer. We have an affordable housing advocate from the Fair Housing Council of Oregon, Sam Goldberg, as well as a real estate professional that works here at Windermere in Lake Oswego, Tam Hickson. We also had at-large members that were appointed. Alex Byers has some experience working with transportation planning and other sort of planning for parks and natural resources. And Todd Prager has experience with actually specifically developing tree code that relates to middle housing. So a little bit of different expertise in terms of the folks that were appointed to the Middle Housing Code Advisory Committee there.
Eric, can I make one comment on the previous slide?
Absolutely.
So for the Plan Commission, I'd just like to note that we still have some logistical issues that we're working through. And so I think we can talk about it maybe towards the end of the presentation. But we still have to determine a Planning Commission liaison. we weren't able to finalize the middle housing code advisory committee plan commission liaison the way we had originally hoped. So it's still an open. I just wanted to make a note of that. We can talk about it maybe towards the end, but it's still an open.
Yeah, and just on that note, I can just point out what those meeting times were. So if any folks,
Sure.
We've kind of gone through some of the scheduling at least for those dates. So again, I've pointed them out on the slide here, but can also send those over and give folks a more specific sense as a follow-up as well, if you prefer. So anyway, just kind of touching base now on our work plan for phase 2. So this is kind of, just beginning really here. And you can see at the beginning of this timeline, you can see the sort of end of phase 1, the scoping and chartering, also kind of began alongside the Joint Planning Commission and City Council work session and the Planning Commission work sessions. So, I think at this point, the City Council has appointed the advisory committee, and we're really developing materials to get the advisory committee process started really in July. So that's what we envision from July through September roughly for the advisory committee process to be really the focus of our work through those months. In October, we had tentatively scheduled just another check-in between both the City Council and Planning Commission on the recommendations from the advisory committee. So just talking a little bit more about what sort of what came out of that process and where to go from there. Also in October, we had envisioned a community forum. So we had proposed 2 community forums between now and the public hearings that would occur at both the Planning Commission and City Council. So one of those would be at sort of the culmination of the advisory committee process, talking about some of the recommendations that resulted from that process and getting folks' input on sort of where to go from there and what they think of those recommendations roughly. So we see that as a pretty good juncture to get some input from the public. And then, after that point, sort of moving into the fall, we would be further developing the code based on some of the recommendations that we heard from the community, from City Council and the Planning Commission in October. And we would schedule additional work sessions at the Planning Commission to talk more about sort of further developing those code concepts and really taking them from concept to language. So after that point, we'd really be working to develop a draft through those months. November, December is really when we'd be, again, taking the recommendations, putting them on paper, and starting to get some input about the draft itself. So we would envision we'd have a public review draft early next year. That would be sort of the result of those work sessions in late fall. We also envision, further work sessions in early 2022 to continue to refine the code as needed. Another City Council check-in, sort of to talk a little bit more about the specific sort of public review draft and where we would really be landing in terms of the Planning Commission's recommendation. And also another community forum to talk a little bit more about how we further refined and developed the code between October and January. So that's kind of the idea, at least for the process that would lead us up to the public hearings, notices that would occur sort of roughly in March, April, sort of spring of 2022. So that's kind of what we had envisioned, at least for the work plan for phase 2. We also did envision bringing Cascadia on board for some help with this. So we're currently renegotiating the scope of another contract with Cascadia to assist in some of the work for phase 2. In terms of just kind of walking through those, what I just outlined in terms of the components of our community engagement and public outreach plan, we talked a little bit about the community forums and just kind of scheduling those at junctures where it would really be valuable to get input from the public. We also, as staff and or sort of, the Cascadia consultants, either Jamin or another representative from their firm, would be prepared essentially to do some outreach directly to neighborhood associations. So we would try to get those again to sync up with these junctures in the process where we again really use some input and have kind of, we've been referring to it as a roadshow in some ways, where we'd be able to have a pretty refined presentation that we could go out and give similar information to all the neighborhood associations. So, we would sort of think about doing this upon request, but also want to, find ways to, use staff resources and time efficiently, and potentially get neighborhood associations to collaborate on, one presentation, maybe amongst 2 or 3 neighborhood associations. So thinking about different ways to work through that, but generally the idea would be to be available during those sort of windows that would coincide with the community forums, so roughly October and January. October of this year and January of next. So we would also be, reinforcing that with social media updates on Facebook, Nextdoor, Instagram, and Twitter, which we have been pursuing already, in addition to LO updates, which we've also been using as a strategy so far this year. The one thing that was not included on the work plan diagram is a middle housing informational session, which we've also envisioned for this summer. We're still kind of putting that together, but the idea would really be to provide information to folks that are just curious about the different forms of middle housing and what they look like, and really just trying to get information about what the adoption of HB 2001 could mean in terms of middle housing types they could see in their neighborhood. So just talking really about what is middle housing in a broad sense. And again, that would be this summer to sort of do some education and outreach prior to those community forums, which will be a little bit more specific in terms of the information. So that brings us, I guess, to the first sort of slide here. I have requesting some input from the commission. I think we really wanted to take this opportunity. Originally had scheduled it for a couple weeks ago, but certainly more important now that we're a few weeks further into the process, to get a sense of how the commission feels about that strategy that I just outlined in terms of both the public engagement and community outreach, as well as the overall work plan, the number of check-ins, and the sort of strategy for developing and refining the code. So, we were wanting to just get input and sort of direction from the commission as to whether we're on the right track with that. So I guess that is, just one conclusion to the presentation. I have another slide with additional direction that I'm looking for, but I leave it up to Chair Heap as to whether you want to discuss this now or later.
Well, let's ask commissioners if they have any comments or questions regarding the public engagement strategy. Commissioners, any comments or questions? Commissioner Leek, go ahead.
I'm wondering if we have somebody at the Lake Oswego Review who tracks these issues and reports on them regularly. I don't seem to see that in the LO Review. And I know it's not a highly circulated paper, but every outreach we can provide would be good, or putting an ad in the review to alert people to the different stages where they could participate.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner Lee. Commissioners, are there any other comments, questions? Erik, maybe one question was the committee, the Middle Housing Code Advisory Committee. It's, we don't really have I think advisory committees that often, but they do come up, as in this case. One of the concerns I was hearing was just the ability of the neighborhood associations to participate. So it looks like the neighborhood associations are being funneled through the chairs committee. Have we got any feedback either from the chairs committee or from neighborhood associations on, do they feel like they're able to be involved in the process, or any concerns with the process from a neighborhood association perspective?
I did hear a concern about the neighborhood chairs committee and, whether or not, I guess a question really as to whether or not they were representative of all of the chairs in Lake Oswego, I suppose. I guess that being said, I haven't heard much concern about who has been appointed necessarily. I think There was just I think one comment that I had received thus far on that note. I will say that we, generally had been, reaching out to folks really to try to get, I guess, representatives from a particular board. And that is the guidance that we got from City Council, was to be reaching out to that particular organization. So.
Sure, thank you, Eric. Yeah, so I think it's something that the commission here, both the Commission for Citizen Involvement as well as the Plan Commission, maybe as we're going through the updates, we can check in and, see if from the neighborhood associations, if they're, if they feel like they're able to really kind of work with the Middle Housing Code Advisory Committee, or if there's any concerns. I'm very optimistic. I mean, I think overall, the committee looks very strong. It's just a great composition of many different very talented folks in Lake Oswego. So I think the committee looks really good. I just want to make sure that everybody has, especially the neighborhood associations, feel like they have a voice. Their voice will be heard and they can participate. I think that's the case. But again, if there's any issues, we can monitor it and try to address any issues. But it sounds good. Like we're not, there were some initial concerns, but those seem to have been addressed. So it's good news.
Yeah, and I guess I would also mention that these meetings will be publicly accessible, and that they will be noticed. There will be meeting materials that are sent out for all of the meetings, and folks will, they will be recorded, and folks will have access to view the meetings as well if they request that. So there will be access to the public, and of course we encourage, we're trying to get as many comments as possible throughout the process so that the committee can consider those kind of along the way. So I think that's something that we intend to build into the advisory committee process.
And just to reconfirm, Eric, when is it envisioned that the Middle Housing Code Advisory Committee, when would be the first meeting? When do you think it'll start?
So it would be, as currently scheduled, July 27th.
Okay.
So the first 3 dates are Tuesday nights. And then the third one is a Wednesday night, but hopefully we at least attempt to ensure that HRAB wasn't meeting on that Wednesday night.
Okay, thank you. And then again, I guess I'll come back to the Plan Commission's liaison role to the Middle Housing Code Advisory Committee. Again, that's open, so we have to close on that. We as a Plan Commission need to, make a recommendation for a liaison. The initial plans we had aren't, working out. So I guess the process for the Plan Commission here, I would recommend is, we don't want to maybe have email conversations, discussion on it, but I'd ask all the Plan Commission members to, seriously consider being a member of the Middle Housing Code Advisory Committee. And if you're willing to be a member, to send a message to staff. And then I think I can check in with staff and just know if we have any, interest from, serving. So right now, we need to revisit that. Like I said, we were trying to finalize it, but we were unable to. So I need all the Plan Commissioners to reconsider serving as that liaison. And then again, if you're interested, just let staff know that you're interested. And then the way forward was probably the next meeting. So as you can see, the meetings are starting July 27th. So, in one of our July meetings, then if we have people that are interested, commissioners that are interested in serving in our Plan Commission meeting, we can then finalize it and then make the recommendation to council and the mayor for our PC representative, I should say. So again, that recommendation, again, we weren't able to finalize. We need to finalize, and again, all commissioners, please consider serving. It's a very important advisory committee. It's a lot of good work they'll do, a lot of interesting discussion, obviously, with this. So please consider serving on that.
Mr. Chair, Evan
Yes.
Boone here. Well, I would suggest the commission take that up at its next meeting on July 12, and the reason is that that would then allow the mayor to consider the appointment for the July 20 council meeting, thus in time for the July 27 meeting, which is the first meeting of the advisory committee. If you wait until the 26th, then it wouldn't occur until September because the council doesn't meet in August. So I think it would be prudent to do it at your next meeting.
I thank you, Attorney Boone. I had forgot about the council doesn't meet in August, so I totally agree. So yeah, I guess we really have a sense of urgency to move, and at our July 12th meeting, we finalize our recommendation for a Plan Commission liaison to the Middle Housing Code Advisory Committee. Again, I'll be checking with staff to see if anybody has indicated that they're able to be considered as our representative. But please, send that in as soon as possible. And I really urge all the commissioners to consider serving on the Middle Housing Code Advisory Committee. Any other final questions or comments for Erik? Commissioner Fisher, it looks like you have your hand up.
Actually, I want to follow up on what Commissioner Heap asked at the community neighborhood association involvement. I noticed there's two. There was Forest Hills and Uplands. Was that a council decision to only have two, or was that just the way it worked out? Or it seems to me if every neighborhood commission or every neighborhood association had somebody there, that would be a great way of letting the community be involved.
Oh, Erik, sorry, you're on mute.
Apologies there. So the council did actually limit it to no more than 2 members representing neighborhood chairs. I think there was a strong focus on getting a diverse representation of different industries and professionals with different expertise where, they could really help us define and refine these code concepts. And I think, we really did, we wanted to include neighborhood association chairs, obviously as much as we could. So that's why we included more slots, I guess, for that particular representation. But yeah, that is what we had sort of recommended to council, and that was what was approved by council.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any other comments or questions? Oh yeah, Commissioner Stewart.
I think maybe one way to look at it is, there's I'm not sure the number, 12 to 13, people that have been appointed to this committee. I would, I think that probably most, if not all of them, live in the city somewhere. So they all live in, our city's neighborhoods. And while they're not representing their neighborhoods, they still have, probably that in the back of their minds. And so there is some, there is representation from other parts of the city in that regard, I guess.
Thank you, Commissioner Stewart. Commissioners, any other comments, questions? None. All right. So thanks, Erik. If we can proceed.
All right. So just one more slide. This is really the second slide that I really want to focus on in terms of direction that we would really appreciate from the commission. And this is really an attempt to sort of digest and sort of report back on what we heard at the last Planning Commission work session about topics for further exploration for the advisory committee. As we stated, we won't really be meeting with the Planning Commission. I won't be at the Planning Commission, before the next advisory committee or the first advisory committee meeting. So this is what we envisioned for just confirmation that this is the direction that the commission was wanting to go in terms of the topics that would be explored by the advisory committee. And, I think there's a few things I wanted to mention. I did, do my best to sort of translate what I heard from the commission into the recommendations that were included in the Middle Housing opportunities report from Cascadia. And so, we did hear at the meeting on the 24th of May, I think Chair Heap had expressed some interest in the recommendation 3 for design and dimensional standards to minimize the visual impact of driveways and garages through things like clustered parking or required sort of paired garage access for townhouse developments. In terms of other recommendations for design and dimensional standards that, I'm not sure that we specifically heard from the commission that the detailed design of entrances and the building width limitations were something to explore. But I did hear a lot of concern about the scale of new middle housing development and sort of the making sure that scale is consistent and doesn't is not too disparate between middle housing and existing single family homes. And so there were some incentives for what was referred to in the opportunities report as context sensitive architecture, encouraging context sensitive architecture, but ultimately that particular recommendation focused on FAR incentives, FAR bonus or height bonus, something of that nature for that sort of context sensitive architecture. And I did hear from the commission that there was not much of a desire to explore those sort of bonus incentive type recommendations. So in sort of my translation of what I heard at the Planning Commission, I figured that limitations on building width might be a good way to control the scale of middle housing, as well as the detailed design of entrances might be a good way to ensure that middle housing might resemble more closely single family residential, which is another sort of some other input that we got, I believe, from Vice Chair Pape at the last session. So so that, that's kind of what I had listed, at least for the design and dimensional standards. I think I heard fairly clearly that Commissioner Leek was interested in sort of further exploring foundational or front yard landscaping requirements, and also that there was some interest from multiple commissioners in regulatory incentives for the preservation of existing homes. So again, that's, again, my attempted translation of what I heard into the recommendations. And so just wanted to, I guess both confirm with the commissioners today that that is accurately representing what you were tasking the advisory committee with, and to ensure that there's nothing else to include in the list. So this is another sort of piece that I would look for a little bit of guidance from the commissioners today, if possible.
Thank you, Eric. Commissioners, feedback for Eric? Commissioner Summer?
Yeah, Senator Olson, the regulatory incentives for preservation of existing houses, would that be an incentive like the AUD incentive for service development fee waivers and things like that? Or is that like the plant more trees and you are able to increase your FAR kind of incentive?
I think it would be, I think it would probably involve more SDC involved incentives, financial incentives for preservation of existing homes. But, I do think that there was at least maybe, it's certainly a possibility that, FAR bonuses could be explored, but that's not, certainly not the only option in terms of ways that encourage the preservation of existing structures. And this is really, again, it's kind of referencing conversions and additions. That's the section of the opportunities report that it's located in. So, obviously this is talking about existing homes as opposed to new homes specifically, but I think that's certainly something that there are a number of different strategies that the advisory committee could explore that might not include, bonuses or additional density.
Okay. No, I think that's a smart trajectory or strategy for, trying to have development be within the existing envelope of a house and maintaining that sort of neighborhood presence and look and feel. So I think that's a smart path forward.
Just to follow up, I did sort of hear that there wasn't much interest in the sort of FAR bonus type of incentive. So that's not I think even if that is maybe one potential route to achieve some of these recommendations, I think, at least staff has heard that from the Planning Commission, and that can translate into the discussions as well.
Commissioners, Commissioner Lee?
Maybe this is not something that can be brought to the advisory committee to discuss, but there was a lot of discussion on our part about parking and off-street parking. And while we may have garages, I would tell you, as a realtor, I came into a homeowners association townhouses, and they mandated that the garages could not be used for storage, that they had to accommodate parking for a car, which I thought was very interesting and possibly prudent because it made the garage actually a parking space and not a storage unit. And I kind of throw that out for thought because parking is a big issue on all of these infill densities.
Thank you, Commissioner Lee. Eric, any comments on the committee considering parking?
Yeah, I think really, these, a few things. We had mentioned previously, at the commission and try to get some guidance in terms of whether to pursue off-street parking regulations that are, either to the standard of the state requirements, or that would be something that would need to be justified through, additional sort of analysis, et cetera. And I think, the direction that we had got at that session was that, because it would be so unlikely to be approved, or just because of the uncertainty as to whether or not DLCD would accept that rationale, that the recommendation was to, at least from this, I think, city council even, was to not pursue that sort of alternative off-street parking strategy. However, I think this recommendation number 3 really is getting at parking. When we talk about driveways and garages and different ways to control parking where it's located. So I think, ultimately that's part of the intent of this. When it comes to, the ways that folks can use their garage, I'm not sure whether that's in the purview of zoning. I'm not, that's probably a Evan Boone question in terms of whether or not we could pursue that and whether that would meet the sort of state requirements. And, I don't see anything that, would suggest that it would be completely outside the realm of possibility, but, certainly that's the intent of these garage and driveway standards, is to sort of get those cars out of the street in an efficient way. So that's certainly something that we could sort of bring up and add to that discussion and explore further.
Thank you. Commissioner Sumler?
Just to follow up on Commissioner Leake's point, I'm just wondering if, per the code or something could be built into the code where a certain amount of storage is then exempt space as you're counting square footage or floor area, just like a mechanical space or something that you don't necessarily have to count as square footage in order to alleviate the need to use your garage as storage only, that the garages could then be used solely for parking as they're intended if you have, way more storage available within the units or the buildings themselves. Just a thought.
I'm not sure I have the definition of floor area with me currently, but I do. I think that there are some allowances for that in terms of within a garage storage being exempted from floor area. But I will research that a little bit more, and perhaps Attorney Boone.
I'm gonna step in here since you've referred to me twice, if I may. I think under the House bill, and it's certainly something for this advisory committee to explore, but I think we would have difficulty imposing standards on middle housing that is not imposed uniformly. Single family homes, we don't we don't require to have parking. If I suppose if we require all middle housing to do so, that's going to be the question as to whether that creates an unreasonable burden, under the code. Why is middle housing required not? So I think it's an evidentiary and a fact-finding justification that would be required. It's certainly appropriate for that advisory committee, but I think it's going to be a challenge.
Thank you. Commissioner Lee, another comment?
Yeah, my comment on that, using the garage as parking, it was an HOA mandated rule.
Right, and certainly HOA, private individuals can do whatever they want to do, and in order to keep cars off the street. The city doesn't have such a rule for any of its housing that, mandates you only park your car in there. We don't go around trying to figure out which cars on the street belong to which houses. So that's also an enforcement nightmare, but that's not my realm either. So.
Right.
Commissioner Fisher, did you have a comment or question?
I was going to ask if it was legal. I mean, can a homeowners association do that? They can say that you can't use your garage for storage. And if that's true, then are we inconsistent in terms of the neighborhoods?
Well, again, I'm going to distinguish between what the private parties decide to do and restrict their house versus what our governmental regulations do. So we would not be inconsistent as long as we have a standard that gets applied. We don't control the private regulations.
Thank you. That's an interesting development. I hadn't thought of that.
Commissioners, any other comment? Eric, maybe one comment was, it looks like you've listed kind of the order that the advisory committee will go in. So first would be the regulatory incentives, and then second would be the foundation. Is that the foundation and front yard landscaping? Is that kind of the rationale behind the numbering of these?
The numbering that I've included here is just simply to reference the Middle Housing Opportunities Report and the way that the recommendations were numbered there.
Okay.
That's just, it means recommendation 3 within, the design and dimensional standards section, or 2 within the trees, and landscaping section. So, we haven't actually, I think when it comes to the agenda of exactly how we're going to, be approaching this, that's the work that, Cascadia and I will be putting together in advance of that July 27th meeting. But we hadn't determined any order yet. So any suggestions in terms of order would be very helpful.
Okay. I'm not sure that we have any suggestions that in order now. It looks like a good list. We didn't talk about stormwater management too much, but I agree that's kind of an important topic for the advisory committee to look at. Often when we hear development, we hear a lot of concerns related to stormwater management. So I think if the advisory committee were to, look at that and give any recommendations based on stormwater management requirements, I think that would be good. Commissioners, any other comments? I see none. Eric, any other final thoughts or?
Oh, I didn't know if Commissioner Fisher had his hand raised there.
Oh, sorry, did I miss you, Commissioner Fisher? I apologize. Commissioner Fisher, yeah, sorry.
That's all right. I'm just curious about number 4. Do we have detailed design requirements for single-family houses?
We don't. I think this is really, it depends on the, depends on the overlay in some instances. So there are some front porch requirements, and for instance, first edition, so that can be considered something like a design entrance design standard. But I think this is really kind of talking about, at least within the context of the opportunities report, had been talking about ways to either combine entrances, perhaps for a duplex or triplex, to minimize the impact of multiple entrances, or talk about the sort of whether an entrance would face in the same direction, with whether you'd have multiple entrances both facing the street, or if one would be facing the side, that type of consideration. So I think, it would be less pertinent generally to single family for the most part, but we do have certain standards that sort of get at some of what Cascadia is referring to in that recommendation.
Thank you.
Thanks. Commissioners, any other comments, questions for the advisory committee? None? All right. Erik, do you feel like you've got the feedback you're looking for tonight, or is there anything else that you'd like to hear from the commission?
Yeah, no, I think this rounds out the list. I think, I had included that recommendation number 5 and 4 that maybe you hadn't specifically referenced, again, sort of maybe as a response to some of the comments to, encourage ways for middle housing to more closely resemble single family housing, and also to, address some of the potential disparities in scale. So, I guess just confirmation that those are, things that you would be interested in exploring for that purpose, and that's sort of the right track, I guess, would be the only thing that I would ask for.
For commissioners, feedback on number 4, number 5, the detailed design entrances and limiting building widths. I would just add, Erik, yeah, I think, the number 4, number 5, I was looking at from, really addressing issues of scale. I thought it helped mostly with scale. I wasn't thinking so much of, in general, how it may, fit in more cohesively with single family residences. It was just to try to address the, issues of scale where, I think part of the concerns was that, from a middle housing code, some of the developments may be very large, may overwhelm the single family, homes that are surrounding it. So, trying to scale that in was the biggest concern. So I think it's good to add number 4 and number 5. Commissioners, any other comments or questions on number 4 and number 5? No?
Great.
Erik, is there anything else that you wish to share tonight, or was this the
That's it
conclusion?
for now, and yeah, I think this gives me all the input that I need to move forward. So thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Erik. So again, I think one of the big actions required from the Plan Commission here is to send in, any interest to staff if you're interested in serving on the Middle Housing Code Advisory Committee. And then in our meeting July 12th, we really need to kind of put that nomination in place. So that's the big action on our part, is to come up with that recommendation. And then let me just check back. And Iris, there was nobody that we heard from that wanted to make a public comment tonight. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, so I'm going to close the public comment period, and then I'm going to close the agenda item here for House Bills 2001 and 2003. So thanks to Erik and staff for giving us an update. And we look forward to working with the Middle Housing Code Advisory Committee and hearing kind of what the recommendations are. So it looks like an outstanding committee, really interested in, understanding and seeing the output that the committee does. So we'll move on next to our next agenda item, other business. There was no other business. Did staff have any other business they wish to discuss? None. And then item number 8, schedule review. Jessica, is there an update we'd like to do for schedule review?
So I'm Jessica Manu. I should have introduced myself. I'm filling in for Scott, who's on vacation. He will be back for your next meeting on July 12th. And Scott did not give me any particular item that he wanted me to talk about this evening. I believe that Iris has forwarded you the draft PC schedule. And next up on July 12th, you have your continued hearing for the zone change on Boones Ferry Road for the to allow affordable housing. So I know that that's a big item for your July 12th meeting. I don't have any other updates other than that Scott didn't leave me with anything in particular to share with the commission this evening, but certainly if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
All right, thank you.
Iris?
Iris?
Yeah, I just wanted to let everybody know, if you don't already, that the next meeting's in person on July 12th.
And, yeah, and Iris, how many people, just for the planning purposes, and I'm thinking of the middle housing selection, the recommendation process, how many people are signed up to testify?
Approximately 30 that have not
30.
testified yet.
Okay, 30 times 5 minutes, that's 150 minutes, which would be 60,
2.5 hours.
2.5 hours. So I just want to make sure we don't lose the resolution, the selection of the middle housing. So,
Yeah, good point. We'll have to be very efficient in our meeting and make sure that we do cover the middle housing committee advisory, code advisory committee appointment or recommendation. Yes. Right, commissioners, any comments or questions on the schedule? Commissioner Leak?
Sorry about that. If we're meeting in person, is that in city chambers, and is it still 6:30?
That is correct. And if you haven't, has everyone been to the new council chamber? And if not, it is on the 3rd floor of City Hall. At this point, if all COVID restrictions are dropped on June 30th, as per the governor's order, we don't believe we're going to have any occupancy limits. But I was told today that we may still have to comply with OSHA requirements, and they haven't gotten guidance on that. So it's possible we may still have to wear a mask. So just be prepared at that in-person meeting that you may need to still wear a mask, but we do not expect to have any occupancy limits for that meeting on July 12th.
Maybe I make a recommendation too. So I think for all of us, this is going to be our first meeting, getting into City Hall, or our first, experience going into the new City Hall. So I'd maybe recommend that we try to arrive, 10 to 15 minutes early so that we can get the meeting started on time. We know it's going to be kind of a packed agenda. We'll try to get everybody in, but we definitely want to start the meeting on time. So if everybody can try maybe to arrive 10 to 15 minutes early, we'll try to start on time. Yeah, Commissioner Lee.
Will the people be testifying in person also then, or will they be testifying via Zoom?
In person.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Fisher.
They're parking? Where do we park? I haven't been there. I'm embarrassed.
Oh yeah,
to
good
say.
question.
We can share that. We have a map that we share to show where the main entrance is, because there's just one entrance that's accessible right now. So I can ask Iris to share that map with you. But we do have the lower parking lot of City Hall. The old City Hall is open for parking. And then there's also street parking around the building as well. And if that is full, we do have some overflow parking as well. But I would think you would, when you are arriving, that you will probably be okay to find a spot in the lower parking lot.
Okay. Commissioners, any final comments or questions on Commissioner Lee?
How's the air conditioning in the new building?
Perfect. I'm in now, and I'm glad to be here and not home.
Thank you.
Stuck in the one room that doesn't have an AC vent in our house, of course. So.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for attending tonight. I'd like to adjourn the meeting now, but thanks everyone for attending, and we look forward to seeing everybody in person on July 12th.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Good night.
Night, everybody.
Good night.